Professor Yosef or Professor Badaracco better?
Or you could call me Joe.
Oh, Joe. Okay.
Welcome to Dr. Sonia Wibisono YouTube channel. Jangan lupa klik subscribe, karena subscribe itu gratis. Klik like, klik share agar teman-teman bisa dengar juga manfaatnya. Klik lonceng, gambar lonceng, silahkan komentar sebanyak-banyaknya.
What from all of the books that you've written, which one that really inspire you the most?
Well, that's a hard question. No one has ever asked that. I think the book, there's two, I have to give you two. One is called Leading Quietly, and that's an alternative to the standard model of leadership, which is heroic leadership. And I think most of the things that get done in organizations are done by people moving quietly. And this book describes how they work. The other book I like a lot is called Questions of Character, and basically there I try to draw some lessons about leadership from works of literature as opposed to interviewing executives or case studies. So I'd say those are the two.
Okay, what do you mean by silent leadership? Because we have a president now, his name is Jokowi, and he is just being elected as a president, and he's really a quiet man. He's not really like people who likes to talk a lot, but he does a lot of strategy to do leadership. Yeah, but he is really silent.
Well, I think our President Obama might have been the same sort of person in terms of personality style, but I also mean how somebody actually gets things done in an organization, and even certain attitudes or philosophies they have. So quiet leaders tend to be more modest about their ability. They tend to be less confident they can see what's going to happen in the future. They tend to listen as much as they talk. They do a lot of homework, so they know what's going on. They don't think they have the answer quickly. And when it comes to getting things done with other people, they're willing to compromise and negotiate. They look for creative compromises, but basically they don't think they have found the truth, and the world and the organization is just waiting for them to announce the truth. They don't see things that simple. So they work quietly behind the scenes, and I think that's how a lot of important work gets done. Not by a hero in front of a camera announcing the truth.
Okay, so like a strategize, more to strategy, making strategy.
Strategy in terms of direction, and also being strategic about how you get things done, working with other people. As opposed to the classic leader, maybe a military leader, leading the charge up the hill, waving the flag.
Okay.
And you know, in this country, the entrepreneurial model is often kind of the heroic model. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, people like that.
Okay. So what do you think is the most important in leadership?
Oh,
So many, yeah?
another hard question. I think two things. One is real clarity about what you're trying to accomplish. So a sense of longer direction. And not something vague, but something that's fairly concrete in a relatively short period of time, months or years. This is how I want the world to be different. So that's one thing. And then I think working with people who share your views. And the final thing I'd emphasize is making sure that when you deal with problems and issues and dilemmas, and you always do, if you're running something, you always deal with those, that you have a norm in your group or in your company that you're going to look at the facts and the realities as honestly and directly as you can. So those are the three things I'd say: a direction that's somewhat specific, the right team, and then this practice of sort of honesty, directness, looking at reality.
How to choose a right man in a position? Do you prefer the smart guy or the kind and honest guy?
Well, it's so hard to do, and if you talk to executives, they'll often say that hiring the right person is one of the trickiest things they do, and they often get it wrong, despite their efforts. I think there's really two phases. You do the best you can before you hire somebody, to get to know them, to learn about them from other people they've worked with. And then you see how things go. And if things work well or pretty well, that's fine. If there's problems, You first see if the problems are you or your organization, and you try to take care of those. If the problem seems to be something about what the person does, you give them feedback. This is coming back to the honest realities of things. You give them feedback and see if they adjust. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't, and then you've got to change things.
Okay. And how about the leadership in the millennial era? Because it's very different to leading millennial kids compared to the baby boomers like me. You know, we are like in the 40th age when we really value the loyalty, while the millennial kids now, they tend to look for a very different job, changing quickly because they have a lot of choices. They also have a more freelance choices. When they can do everything by their own.
Yeah,
Is it difference in the leadership?
It's a challenge, and it is a difference. And at least in this country, a lot of millennials, when they were very young, they went through the bursting of the dot-com bubble.
Yeah.
Then in 2008, there was the global financial crisis. And there was ones who graduated from college shortly after that had trouble finding jobs. Lots of them saw family members losing their jobs. So the old long-term loyalty-based organization is not something they've experienced and not something they believe in. I think what often gets younger people excited is giving them a good project to work on, a project where they think the project will make a difference and they can make a difference. And then if you're leading or if you're the boss, being involved in the project so they get to see you and get reaction and feedback from you. But it's a much more project-oriented world, as opposed to the classic sort of Japanese world where you're hired after college and you work for that company for your whole career and you really can't lose your job. This is a world that's very different from that. But so I think, and you know, millennials supposedly want promotions sooner. You can't promote everybody soon, but you can at least give them more responsible tasks, and they want feedback, so you have to give them a lot of feedback.
Okay.
But I think this project focus, as opposed to the focus on the organization or the long term, is at least a good starting point.
So projects by projects is
Yes.
better, yeah?
Yes.
So when they get results, so you give them more challenging projects.
And a team you can work with. In other words, not necessarily an individual, but here's 5 people, let's see if you can do this, here's the deadline, let's see what you can do.
So what is the hardest problem in becoming a leader?
Hmm.
A lot of problems. I'm like, it's gonna be every day. There's gonna be a lot of problems. But what is the hardest problem, and what do you think are the best solution to react for the problem?
Well, I think one thing that is very hard is learning to really trust yourself when you make hard decisions. So having the confidence, assuming you've done your homework and you've gotten the data you need, or you've talked to people with relevant experience, you're ready to make the decision. And often you know what you need to do. Doing it and following through on it and having the confidence you can do it is a really big psychological and emotional step in becoming a leader. There's lots of other things, but it's taking ownership of a problem, ownership of the situation, really sort of taking responsibility. I'm going to make this happen, this is what we're going to do. And it's not something you do once in your career and become a leader. If you do it and do it well, you get promoted. And then you have more complications and more responsibility and often more uncertainties. And you have to do it again. But it's this confidence in yourself that to drive forward, I think is...
And when do a leader think that he needs to stop? If there's any like a loss of money, or the company is already unprofitable, when to stop fighting?
Well, sometimes your investors and your customers will tell you, because they're moving on. a really hard problem in a lot of startup organizations because you have a founder and maybe an early team. They believe in the product, and they get bad news and they still believe in the product. I think unless somebody says no more money, or unless you have to start firing a lot of people, closing your production facility, I'd say keep trying. Don't keep trying to do the same thing. See if you can modify some of what you're doing. Maybe modify it significantly, but keep going. And at some point the world will tell you to stop, or you'll know you need to stop. But I think the world in general is a better place if you have people who believe in something they want to do and try hard to do it and keep trying hard to do it. And eventually they or the world will bring that to an end if it needs to come to an end.
Okay, the discipline of building character. Where and when should we begin building character? Because nowadays from baby we are already exposed to gadgets, like my kids.
Yes.
So are we starting to building characters from babies for the millennials, and how do we start to do it?
Well, I think you can take character in two senses. So there's one sense in which our character starts developing when we're very young, and we don't have any control over it. You know, parents, friends, environments, media, it all shapes you in different ways. But then you do reach a certain point in life where you make decisions about how you're going to spend your time, what you care about, what you're going to work on, what standards you're going to try to follow. And that's where you do have some opportunity in some ways to shape your character, so that you try sort of regularly and habitually to do things in some ways and not in other ways. You try to think in certain ways about problems, try to work with people in certain ways, and you try to keep following through on that until it becomes almost a kind of second nature. So that's where you can shape your character a little bit. It's sort of like
Habits, yeah.
a lump of clay, you know, and some of the clay is hardened. You're a sculptor and you've got this lump of clay, and some of it is hardened and some of it's getting hard and some of it is soft, and you can change it a little bit. And so you do what you can with that lump of clay, but you can only affect some of it, but work on that.
So what is the best character that we should build? Like, is it honesty and building kindness?
So hard to isolate those things, but if you're a manager, I think how you work with other people, your ability to bring out the best in them is really important. And that means you have to, and this, you don't do this in the same way with everybody. You have to understand who they are, what their challenges are, what they're good at, and try to bring out the best in them. And the other thing is something I've already mentioned, which is just trying to be as honest as you can about the realities. And we all like to think we're honest and see things as we are, but that's really not true. We prefer to look in the mirror and see younger versions of ourselves, and look at our history and see lots more successes and failures. And I think this kind of honesty about yourself, your organization, what's working, what isn't, is just to be able to, you know, you've got to be committed to things, you know, to get things done. I've talked about taking responsibility. At the same time, you've got to be able to see things pretty objectively. And if you can't do that, that's a problem.
Okay, so you've been very expert in the leadership in the United States, also in Japan. So what is the good sides that we can take from American leadership and from Japanese leadership?
Well, what strikes me about the Japanese, it's not so much leadership in terms of the person in charge, but it's the sort of the Japanese way of getting things done. They're very thorough. If there's data available, they get it. And they keep working on things to make them better and better and better. In Toyota automobile factories, this was originally known as Kaizen, continuous improvement. But my sense, as an amateur observer of Japan, is that applies very widely in Japanese life.
Yes, very detailed, yeah. They do everything detailed.
That's right. But with the idea of constantly learning and making things better. Not dramatically better, but better. I think in America we have a loose, impossible to comprehend sort of country. So I think that this is a huge country, 300 million people. Everything good that human beings do that's interesting, exciting, important is happening somewhere in America. And all sorts of terrible things are also happening somewhere in America, and nobody really understands the whole thing. So it's within this loose framework that I think what Americans traditionally used to be good at is deciding, this is what I want to do, this is important, this is how we're going to do things. It's a much more sort of entrepreneurial than organizational approach to management and leadership. That said, the final thing I'll say is that there does seem to be more evidence that Americans are becoming less entrepreneurial.
Really?
Yes, I mean there are fewer businesses started up, fewer young people, millennials want to start businesses. Big, stable organizations are often growing more and more powerful. More people want to treat them like luxury liners, cruise ships, get on those cruise ships for their careers. People don't move as often as they used to. There's lots of evidence. And then what you have with social media and other things is a lot of people creating their own little community of people like themselves, as opposed to getting jostled by other people and having to change their behavior and thinking. So all these are ways in which America is almost becoming a little bit more like what we used to criticize about Europe, a very stable, organized, traditional society. And I think that's happening here.
So it's less and less entrepreneur.
Yes, less dynamic, less fluid. Yes.
Okay. How about in Japan?
I think Japan is just, my impression, is just Japan. It changes and it does remarkable things, but step by step by step.
Okay. What do you think about our Indonesia, like the emerging countries? Do we really need to have a lot of more entrepreneur, but the mindset sometimes we don't have a strong character and a lot of like lazy people who doesn't wanna like improve themselves and doesn't wanna do better and better like in Japan. You know, what do you think the government or the organization should do to influence people to be more entrepreneurial?
Well, I think that this is, of course, a vast generalization, but I think that a lot of people who seem to be sort of lazy are actually sort of doing what they think makes the most sense in their circumstances. They're kind of optimizing. So you need to create new opportunities for them. Sometimes they need training, but new opportunities where they have a sense that if I take initiative, I can benefit from that. And then you have to create sort of market incentives around them. So if you do a little more, you earn a little more. If you do a lot more, you get a lot more. If you don't do anything, you don't have nearly as much. So in a very general way, I'm in favor of markets, favor of opportunity, and favor of education. I think that's education and training. Those together are a very powerful chemistry, and they will awaken a lot of people.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Again.
You're welcome. Best of luck to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.